We're back here in downtown Kelowna, and we're at Kelowna Wines / Sandhill Wines. This is the oldest continuously operating winery in BC. It was started in 1931. This building that I'm walking by right now has been here since 1951. And it really helped start the wine industry in the province. But the beginning was pretty rocky. In fact, if it wasn't for the story I'm about to tell you, this winery would have never survived. In the year 1930, Okanagan orchardists had a problem. They literally had too much of good thing. In the previous 20 years, hundreds of acres of apple and fruit orchards had been planted around Kelowna. In the late 20s, these orchards were all becoming mature, which meant they were producing more fruit. Unfortunately, the fruit marketing industry did not grow as quickly. This meant that Okanagan farmers had more fruit than they knew what to do with. Markets were glutted, prices plummeted, and farmers protested a cent a pound or on the ground. And as we can see in this picture, that's just where much of the fruit ended up, rotting on the ground. This man thought he had the answer. This is Cleto Candido Desiderato Patrizio Brenna from the Veneto region of Italy. In Italy, he ran a silk factory in San Bonifacio. He came to Canada in 1912, and there he changed his name to Giuseppe Ghezzi, or Joseph. Joseph Ghezzi was a man full of ideas, and in 1931 he brought one of those ideas to Kelowna. He brought with him samples of wines and ciders made at an experimental plant in Italy from BC fruit. Why let apples rot? He reasoned, when we could turn them into wine, even sparkling wines, and sell them. 1 year later, Domestic Wines and Byproducts Limited was born. The name is factual, if not terribly romantic. It appears marketing may not have been Ghezzi's forte, as can be seen from this picture. Those first wines that they produced had the uninspiring names of OK Clear, OK Red, and OK Port. Now, granted, OK is an abbreviation for Okanagan, but it did put an unfortunately mediocre label on these products. Initial sales were sluggish, to say the least. Prohibition had officially ended in BC a decade earlier, but the provincial government still had a death grip on liquor sales. And if that wasn't bad enough, it was found that the wines made from fruit had a tendency to continue fermenting in the bottle, which caused them to blow up on shelves. Based on the initial quality of the wine, perhaps even calling them okay was stretching the truth. Ghezzi needed help. So he approached a fellow Italian who ran a successful grocery store in Kelowna, a man known as Cap Capozzi. Capozzi had been in Kelowna for a decade and had the connections Ghezzi lacked. He quickly rounded up a small group of investors from the area, including many Italians. 2 were from the pioneer Casorso family, Peter, a son, and Mary, a granddaughter. And these were substantial donations. Peter Casorso invested $1,000, which would be equivalent to $17,000 today. Cap Capozzi also approached a good friend of his, the man who ran the hardware store a few doors down from his grocery, W.A.C. Bennett. Now, Bennett was a teetotaler, and he really had no interest in producing alcoholic products, but he did want to get into politics, and so he was very much interested in creating new jobs at the onset of the Great Depression. This seemed like a good way to do that. Thanks to this influx of cash, Domestic Wines could survive for a few years. In 1934, they did manage to change their name to Kelowna Wines, which was a step in the right direction. They also decided to focus on making wine from grapes rather than byproducts, but the company continued to struggle. As I said, many of the initial investors and employees of Kelowna Wines were Italian. In 1935, it was looking very likely that many of them would lose the money they invested or their jobs, and in some cases, both. And that was not something you wanted to happen in the middle of a depression. Then, you might say, a miracle happened. These Italians would have also been Catholic, which meant every Sunday they went to the same church to pray. This church, the Immaculate Conception Church. The priest there was Father Mackenzie, and after hearing the dire straits of many in his congregation, the priest had an idea. If you're Catholic, you have Mass. And if you have Mass, you drink sacramental wine. At that point, all the sacramental wine used by the Catholic Church in Canada came from Spain, but, reasoned the father, why couldn't it come from Canada? Why couldn't it come from Kelowna wines? He went upstairs, perhaps in more ways than one, and got approval for his idea. The result was St. John's Sacramental Wine, and that one contract kept Kelowna Wines afloat. Over the years, Kelowna Wines has continued to be an innovative player in the Canadian wine industry. As our taste matured, Kelowna Wines has managed to also reinvent itself, moving from early products like Royal Red to hugely popular blockbusters like Schloss Lederheim, and then to today's celebrated vintages produced here by Sandhill. But it's not a stretch to say none of this may have happened if it wasn't for Father Mackenzie and the Catholic Church. So that's the story of how the Catholic Church actually saved Kelowna wines. That's my last story, the last one I'm going to share with you. But before we say goodbye, we're going to show you some of the great new microbrews that have grown up around this area.